Okay, welcome back. So now that we have a logic model and objectives and indicators, the question becomes, how are we going to gather data about our program and use it as evidence whether or not our program was successful? So we're going to move into types of evaluation design. How do we design our evaluation to collect the kind of information that we need? There are, as you might expect, lots of different types of possible designs. This could be an entire course, obviously, but we're going to focus on three main categories. And within each category, we're going to focus on a few to a handful of different options. These run from very, very, very simple, which might be what you need, to extremely complicated, which might be also what you need. It really depends on your project and the size of it, and the scope and the funding and all those kinds of intangible qualities that might dictate what you need in an evaluation design. So we'll run through pretty quickly some different options just to give you an idea of how you might want to structure your evaluation. So three main categories are going to be pre-experimental, which you're probably going to be very familiar with, using a comparison group, and then finally randomized control trials. So starting with pre-experimental designs, the key here is that you have one group that you are measuring. This one group is certainly your audience or your participants or those who came to your program, right? Three main types of designs in this category. Post-test only, as you might expect, is literally some kind of measure given at the end of a completion of a program. So this very often is a post-program survey, right? Or a post-test. And here you're looking mostly for some kind of knowledge gain, right? So people come to your program, you spend an hour with them, you give them a bunch of information, and then at the end of it, you hand out a survey that asks what they learned. You collect that information, and then you sort of see if anybody learned anything, or how much they learned, or how many of them learned what you were teaching. And you see if that matches up with your indicators of success, right? Second type, a little more complicated, is a pre-test post-test. So in this case, you're giving a pre-program measurement, so perhaps a survey, and then you're giving really the same one at the end of your program. What this does is it gives you a baseline measure, right? So it gives you some idea of what they could do or what they know before they come into your class. And then afterwards, you can see how much they improved as a result of your programming. So with that simple pretest, this design has become much more powerful and much more indicative of success than just the post-test. When folks come to your program, you really don't know where they are. They might have knowledge that you don't expect or skills that you don't expect. The pretest is going to determine where they're at when they come into your program. And it's really going to help you to create a sort of cause and effect between your program and ultimately what they learn, right? So it could be a survey. You could be observing outdoor skills, right? Let's say you're a camp counselor and you want to teach some outdoor sort of survival skills. You could have them do something when they first show up and then observe them and watch them and take some notes and then teach them skills and then have them do it again and see what they learned. And the final design is a bit of an odd one, post-test, then pre-test. So in this situation, you're giving them one tool or instrument at the end of a program, but you're asking them to rate themselves or give you information about what they knew before the program. So for example, a statement about increasing their knowledge in a certain area. You're going to ask them, when you came to the program, what did you know about X? Now that the program is over, what do you know about X? So maybe you're asking them to rate something on a scale of 1 to 5 before they came in and after they came in. So it's a good tool in some situations. It's not as good as a pre-test, post-test. But if you need to get some baseline data and you only have opportunity to do a post-test assessment, then this might be for you. Lots of things limit our ability to do a pretest, time, resources, etc. So post-test, then pretest, also called a retrospective, might be for you. All right, so moving into the comparison group designs, 5 to talk about here. Again, the real key of these designs is that you have a comparison group. So you have your audience of participants, and then you have some other group that is similar to your group that you're going to compare them to, right? So let's say you're in a school and you are working in one classroom and you're teaching these kids how to eat healthier, right? You want to really improve their intake of fruits and vegetables. The class next door doesn't have the opportunity for you to come in and talk to them. So that's a group that could be a comparison group to who you're working with, right? So similar population, similar school, similar demographics. You're going to use that group to compare them to your group. The easiest way to do this is through a naive design, where you're merely comparing some kind of mean for your group and the untreated group. So let's say, for example, you are you do an after-school STEM program where you are really working with kids in biology and chemistry and physics. Maybe they're in high school, and you're trying to get them excited about the sciences, looking for a career in the sciences, and ultimately to improve their grades in their science curriculum. So maybe you're looking at the mean grade point average for their STEM classes in their high school career, and you're going to compare that to the mean GPA for STEM classes for students that you didn't work with. And you're seeing if there's a difference in STEM GPA amongst these two groups. So really simple and a great way to look for the presence of outcomes in a comparison group. All right, basic value added is this, but bumped up a little bit, very similar to a pre-test, post-test. So the naive design, but you're adding a pre-programmed measure, and then you are doing your program or your intervention, and then you're doing your assessment afterwards, right? So you're adding this baseline piece of information in that's going to help you to really isolate your program's impact. Interrupted time series is where you're having a longer period of time, perhaps, with several points of measurement before and after your program. So for example, instead of just grabbing the GPA after your program, maybe you are getting their GPA for a couple of years before they even come to your program, and their GPA a couple of years after your program. Let's say you are working in middle schools and you are there to work with 8th graders. Maybe you have access to their grade point averages in 6th grade and 7th grade, a couple semesters of STEM, just to be able to gather some more data points. And then they go off to high school, and perhaps you have a long-term grant, and you can follow and track and collect their GPA when they get into high school, and compare that to a group that did not go through your program, right? So similar to pre-test, post-test, but a lot more pre and a lot more post. The fourth one is fixed effects for longitudinal evaluations. And again, this one's not often used in extension, but you're comparing outcomes for each individual during periods in which they participated. So instead of this kind of collective idea or this collective group, this kind of cohort effect, you're looking at outcomes for individuals. And then finally, the kind of the highest level in comparison groups is the idea of matching. So instead of comparing one classroom to another classroom, you're actually going to match individual members from each group to an individual member from another group, right? And you can match those on any sort of characteristics or demographics that you think are important, right? So you have a group of students that you're working with, and you're going to match each one of those students to a corresponding student in a different comparison group. You might match them on things like age, or some demographic qualities, or household income, or parents' education level, or things that you think are really critical to match on. Again, this is a pretty complicated process. And so it is definitely one for larger projects. We don't do it a lot in regular evaluation an extension. But if you had, again, a grant or you had some specialty help from an evaluator, this could be a path for you. The third category, as I mentioned, are randomized controlled trials, or RCTs. This is not commonly used in extension, really only used in very specific situations that might be leading into research a little bit. So if you're working with perhaps someone in faculty who are doing a project, you might get into RCTs. But we think it's important to talk about just so that you're aware of the possibility. Two main types here, pre-test, post-test, control group design. The key to RCTs is that participants are randomly assigned to groups, right? Instead of you having a group of participants and then finding or creating a pre-existing comparison group, randomized control trials are exactly that. They're random and participants are randomized into groups. This is the best way statistically that we can sort of do this to ensure the best comparison possible. Again, pre-test, post-test, everybody gets a treatment. There's a pre-test, there's a post-test, and we see what happens. The simpler version of that is the post-test only design. Again, randomization happens, and you do sort of a post-assessment afterwards. So why don't we do this in extension? This is the way that things optimally could or should be done. We're not usually in the business of randomly offering or withholding our services from people in Ohio, right? So we tend to want to talk to, educate, work with, share information as many folks as possible, whether that's youth or adults or our communities. And so this idea of randomization of kind of who gets our services in versus who doesn't exactly sit well with our work in extension. It works great for research, but not necessarily the day-to-day of our work. But again, wanted to mention it, to keep it in mind. You might find yourself a part of these kind of things in the future.